Evening, members. Can I welcome you to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting? The meeting is being recorded, so if you bear that in mind, it will go into the public domain. It is a new administration, and this is our first Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. And I'm conscious that I know there may be 16 or 17 new members, and I went back and just reviewed Article 6 of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Now, I know you've all read it, but I'd just like to quote the beginning of it to set the scene. The Council is required by law to discharge certain overview and scrutiny functions. These functions are an essential component of local democracy. Overview and scrutiny committees can contribute to the development of council policies and also hold the Cabinet to account for its decisions. Another key part of the overview and scrutiny role is to review existing policies, consider proposals for new policies, and suggest new policies. Overview and scrutiny should be carried out in a constructive way and should aim to contribute to the delivery of efficient and effective services that meet the needs and aspirations of local residents. Okay. Thank you for that. Moving on to the agenda, item 1, minutes of the meeting. Is it your wish that I sign this has been a true and accurate record of the meeting we had on the 31st of January 2023? Your content? Okay. Item 2, do we have any apologies? Carol?
I have received apologies from councillors Bond, Evans, Hopkins, Jackson, Nelson, Spruce and Kay Williams.
Thank you. Are there any more apologies from the floor? Thought there might be.
I assume Warren Fisher's on his way, so yeah, he said he desperately wants to take part in the meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Sorry.
I declare an interest in item 5, the closed churchyards revision of special expense decision, as a member of General Synod of the Church of England, Lichfield Darson Synod Finance Committee, Bishops' Council and the Audit and Risk Committee.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of openness, I would also like to declare that myself and Councillor Dufty have an interest in item 5 on the agenda as well, simply by virtue of the fact that during the election campaign, myself and Councillor Dufty raised this particular issue as part of the campaigning that we undertook. I think it's fair to say that we clearly have opinions which we wish to share with the group, and obviously we wish to hear the opinions of everyone else who's here as well. And just to be fair, we have also met with the leader of and with other members of the cabinet as well, and we are very keen to find a solution and a way forward that is fair to everyone in South Staffordshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Are there any others? No, in that case, we'll move on. Item 4, Integrated Performance Management Report 2022-23, Quarter 4 and outturn. And I think this is our Chief Executive, Dave Hayward.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, before handing over to Jackie Smith and John Mayo, just to take you through the detail of the report, something that's very much linked to our performance was the return visit of the Local Government Association peer review team, who met with the senior leadership team and the leader last Friday to discuss our progress since they visited us last September now. Prior to the return visit, we sent them evidence of the progress we've made, in particular the evidence against the 8 recommendations within the original report, which I circulated to you a few weeks back now for information. The peer team reviewed the progress with us and were again very complimentary of the continued drive and ambition of the council, and the recognition that although only a small number of recommendations were made, we have gone above and beyond and continuing to sustain the pace to work and build on the work we're doing, but importantly, recognise that we're continually looking at how we can improve and do things differently and work with a wide number of organisations. And actually, they've asked us to present at the next annual Local Government Association conference in the innovations zone on what we're doing as a council, which is very nice recognition indeed. We'll receive a full report over the coming weeks, which we'll share with you. But I just wanted to share with you the initial feedback, particularly as it's very much linked to this agenda and the overall performance. So with that, I'll hand over to Jackie in the first instance.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, members. This is very much a joint presentation between myself and John because you really don't want me to present the finances. It's important that John does that on behalf of the officers. Just really then in terms of to bring really the integrated performance report to life. This is a dual one in the fact that it actually does give indications about what just Q4 outturn is, but at the same time it also gives the annual outturn against the council plan. And it's really very much in relation to the performance measures that the council plan has and how really overall the outturn position is very strong, and there was a small number of indicators that were not on target by year end. But for example, if you took the processing of the new housing benefit and council tax support claims, the target was that they would be dealt with in an average of 15 days. During the first 2 quarters, it was identified that actually we were seeing a peak demand in for the service, and therefore we actually have invested. And I think therefore you can see by the Q4 performance that actually the outturn on that was 13.36 days as an average, which shows that actually we're using the performance indicators to actually identify where we potentially need to put further investment in, and actually the result is that that has actually on the quarter position actually been a positive indicator, but clearly overall because of the first part of the year it actually meant it didn't hit the target in the overall position. John will, as I say, cover the financial position, but also integrated into this is the strategic and operational risks. I'm not going to dwell on those, but we'll be happy to take any questions if members have got them. But what I would mention to members is that a review has now been completed of all the risks and an update which is commencing from 2023, and that will be presented as, in the future as part of the integrated management report, which I think is probably a stronger indicator of the risks and how they do link to performance and the finances. But just to give a little bit of context in terms of the overall position then, members will be aware that we have seen pressures in community services, particularly in relation to the membership, and that has an impact on the finances and is clearly one of our risks. However, the investment of the 3.4 million into the centres has now been completed and is reflected in the increasing number of memberships. And in fact, although it can't be reported as part of this, we have more members at 3,850, which is higher than the pre-COVID level. But obviously that has taken us into the first quarter of the new year, but we'll hopefully give members some reassurance that that is moving in the right direction. The other one, which is again just to report in terms of our sickness levels, it is for the first time in a long time that we've actually not achieved below the 6.95, and obviously the average was 7.19, which isn't a massive increase in terms of against that target, but equally one that we now have taken on as a corporate leadership team to say that we would want to look at that and make sure that we are taking all the actions to support employees, but at the same time ensuring that that does not impact on performance, which it isn't at this stage. The other area is in relation to the commercial property income, which again, the performance is strong in terms of the low number of actual vacancies that we have during in our rental estates. However, we are aware of the economic climate and the pressure that that is unfortunately having in terms of the actual performance on the commercial estates, and it's one we again will be making sure that we're looking at. But at this stage, we do not believe there's a need to actually increase the risk assessment on the basis that actually we are not seeing that downturn in terms of performance. And then the other item, just to reference, and again, a lot of members will be aware, last year, our customer services team, we saw a massive surge in demand on them. And so a review has now taken place. And in fact, we've now got, although the service has gone back to what we would consider to be normal levels of operation, that review has been put in place, investment again, to ensure that we are in a position to respond when there is that additional demand. And again, we will just be looking at, obviously, that commercial front to make sure that we are looking particularly in 23-24 to ensure that we're measuring that. That's just the general overview in terms of the integrated performance, and I'll now hand over to John on the finances.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I'm going to take a short time just taking members through the salient points of Appendix 2 of the outturn report, which is highlighted as provisional outturn, just simply because, as we speak right now, Grant Thornton are auditing the accounts and keeping my staff extremely busy with a number of queries at present. I'll draw members' attention in the first instance to row 21 of the first page of Appendix 2 and remind members that the budget, when set in February 2022, was for expenditure to exceed income by just over £1 million. £1,051,000 was the budget as set. The provisional outturn that we're presenting tonight shows that, in reality, a draw of £624,000 was meant against that budget, an improvement of £427,000 against the budget, which is very good news, but nevertheless, a reminder still that the outcome was money taken from the general reserves of the council, indicative of the challenges that remain when setting budgets. In terms of drawing out the highlights, I'll refer members straight away to row 11 in the report, the capital financing treasury line, which is the most significant item of variance in the year's outturn. Members will note the provisional variance of £632,000 better than a budget that assumed just £28,000 worth of income from investments. It's worth putting some context to those numbers. When the budget for this particular year was being set, back in the autumn of 2021, it's almost hard to remember, but interest rates at that time were only 0.1%. The first time that the Bank of England rose interest rates was December 2021, at which point the drafting of that budget was nearly concluded. And even when members approved the budget in February 22, interest rates were only 0.5%. It was therefore entirely appropriate for members to approve a budget on the basis of the previous 4 or 5 years of the council experience, that we'd make only negligible returns from the financial balances we held in the bank. I think it's a salient reminder to us all just how economic surprises, when they occur, can have very significant impacts on the financial outcomes for councils. Just so happens, fortunately on this occasion, it was in our favour and enabled us to make considerably more income than we'd initially budgeted for. Row 8 in the report details the service expenditure for the year, and the provisional variance in that line shows that expenditure initially was £476,000 greater than initially set at the budget. But again, there's some context to detail. We initially, when the budget was presented to members in February 22, were assuming a 2% pay award, albeit with knowledge we had at the time, we set up an earmarked reserve for pay and price inflation, recognising the economic climate at that time and recognising the likelihood when the budget was set was that the pay award would be considerably greater than the 2%. And that indeed transpired. In due course, a pay award of £1,925 was a flat amount was awarded to all members, and that averaged out at about 5%. But the earmarked reserve was set aside, did the job it was set out to do, and mitigated in every service area against the additional costs of paying staff. And that is why the general fund impact in row 8 is just a mere favourable variation of £5,000. So the services pretty much balance themselves across the year. When I took members a couple of months back through the finance training, one thing I highlighted is that variations do occur. So whilst the net effect was neutral, there were ups and downs within that 5k betterment. Just to give a couple of quick examples, Jackie in her overviews already highlighted some of the challenges that leisure services had during the course of 22-23, coming out of COVID, and the impact on memberships and classes as the refurbishments were taking place. So community services suffered against their budget targets primarily for those reasons. In contrast, our planning services did particularly well, and planning income was considerably greater than that had been budgeted for at the start of the year. The entire report does detail far more variations, but those are just two to highlight by way of example. And that largely concludes the summary I wanted to present to members. I'm very happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you, John and Jackie. Do we have any questions, please? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, and thank you both for your report. I'm just looking at the services grant, which is showing a negative across the budget. I'm wondering why that has occurred in that way. I'd like an explanation for that, please. And I notice as well the new homes bonus is also showing negatives. I'm very sorry to say that a number of homes in Putney are occupied at the moment, which may have a reflection on that. But I think from my point of view, I was looking for the negative figures in these. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. The fault might be mine here in not explaining the numbers particularly well. The negative, the brackets, just tell the reader it's an income line rather than an expenditure line. So the 499 for new homes bonus is an expectation that we'd receive £499,000 worth of income, which was achieved. And similarly, the services grants, the direct grant from government on exactly the same basis, was a income line of £162,000 we were told we'd receive, and we in due course did receive exactly that. Apologise for not making that clear at the outset.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It was just really, I guess, a question probably for Jackie, which is around the strategic risk register. And it'll probably be, I suspect, answered by the fact that Jackie mentioned that this was being reviewed going forward. So I just wondered whether there was going to be more, I guess the word would be emphasis on what I would call reputational risks that the council may be subjected to.
Thank you. Yes, that's one of the things that again is really important. So that is included in the future risk register. And I think one of the things it's important to stress with a risk register is it's at that point in time and it is constantly being reviewed.
Do we have any further questions? Councillor Penny.
First thing, community service budget. Since that's directly relevant to the next item on the agenda, I'm assuming that is the budget line forward. Just a comment on that, please, as to why it's red flagged at the moment. Is right.
Once again, thank you for the question, Councillor Allen. The red flags which note at the end of the year for those budgets that have gone over budget in simple terms. So if they spent more than they budgeted for or achieved less income than they budgeted for, that's the reasons why we would show them as a red rating. In the case of community services, one item we've alluded to already, it was around leisure services. So they had an income target across 4 leisure centres for 22-23, which they failed to achieve, largely down to the recovery from COVID, which as Jackie alluded to, they've already doing far better in 23-24, and similarly the disruption caused by the closures of facilities during the refurbishment. Another example that comes on community services is the budget within the community hub, the facilities budget. which was hit particularly hard by electricity bills that increased during the year. So another reason why the original budget we'd set in that area was greater than previously anticipated. Page 5 of the report does detail community services in greater length and should explain more why some budgets gone up, some down. And again, I allude to the fact that variations are a natural sort of consequence of any year's budgeting. Some budgets go up, some go down, and what you hope in any given year is you don't get a plethora of reds occurring all at the same time, which is when there could be more serious implications to the general fund. Any year we've got some reds, but other areas that are green that can offset it. We're not quite so concerned, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Steele.
Thank you. It's one for you, Jackie, actually. Customer services. It could be just my impression, and it could be that I'll probably ring it up on a Monday when our bins are supposed to be emptied without any issues. That's another issue. Since the time that you wait on the phone still seems to be excessive. Are there actual target times that we aim for? And also, a couple of local residents to me, one's 89, one's 93. It is no good asking them to go online. Sorry to harp on about this, but we seem to expect everyone to be online, and unfortunately in South Staffs, not everybody is online. Just like your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Councillor Steele, for that question. In terms of the performance, you're absolutely right. On a Monday morning between the hours of 9 and 11, we can see every single week it's a peak time. And in some respects, it is about us managing that expectation. I see every single week the performance of the contact centre, and we average around 3 minutes to respond. However, at peak time, that does go further and extend in terms of the amount of time it takes to answer. One of the things, and the reason we did the customer services review, is that we want to get into a position where we're actually doing more forward planning so that we can deal with and smooth out some of those peak times. Because you could put another 10 advisors on, but the difficulty is the demand is just so great. So again, it's about us actually managing that better and helping our customers. I absolutely, and Cabinet are very clear with us as officers, there is absolutely no way that we will move towards there not being the support to our customers more than they've got to go online. We do offer, and one of the reasons we reintroduced the meet and greet back at these offices when they opened, which wasn't part of the original plan, is because we know that is important for our customers to offer that interaction. And so for us, it is about offering a range of ways that people can contact us. That would be the drive to do that. But certainly I'm seeing an improvement from last year in the performance, but there's more to do, and we will keep doing that.
Thank you for that. Are there any more questions? No? Does anybody wish to debate it? No? Well, there is a recommendation. The recommendation is, it is recommended that members review and note the Q4 Integrated Performance Management Report. Are we all content with that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 5, closed churchyard revision of special expenses decision, and the report, of course, of Councillor Mrs. Perry, please. Oh, okay.
I'm very sorry. I neglected to mention I'm also a member of the patronage board for the parishes of Kinver and Enville, appointed by the bishop. I'll now withdraw.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Mrs. Perry.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members, and thank you for attending this meeting overview and scrutiny meeting tonight. For those of you that don't know me, but I'm sure most of you do by now, I'm Councillor Kath Perry, and as of May this year, I've taken on the role as Cabinet Member for Community Services. Tonight, I'm bringing forward a proposed decision for voluntary scrutiny in relation to financing options to close churchyard, which this council is responsible for now or could be responsible for in the future. My proposed decision, as with the 2019 decision, is a district-wide matter and needs to be considered by members in the context of all 27 parishes. However, things have moved on since the 2019 decision, and the position has been reviewed to reflect the current inflation and cost of living pressures the residents of South Staffordshire are facing. And I'm proposing a revised approach to financing works within a closed churchyard. There is no risk-free solution for the council in this matter, and despite the sound financial position of the council, we are needing to draw on reserves to balance the MTFS each year. And my proposed decision is one that considers the long-term sustainability of the council whilst reflecting the current inflation and cost of living pressures. Before I outline my proposed decision, I will now hand over to Mark Jenkinson, Assistant Director Community Services, to take you through the background of the report circulated to all members in advance of this evening's Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which also contains the original decision made on this matter in 2019. Could you go through the background, please?
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Good evening, members. As Councillor Perry picked up, I will take members through the report in terms of the background to the decision before handing back to Councillor Perry to go through the proposed recommendations on tonight's decision. As members may or may not be aware, within South Staffordshire, we're currently responsible for 4 closed churchyard sites, Wombourne, Coven, Kimber and Swindon. The 2019 decision to impose a special expense was introduced to reduce the long-term financial liability to the council by applying a special expense under Section 35 of the Local Government Finance Act. What that act indicates is those charges in relation to closed churchyards will be applied within that parish area only. The special expense and the decision made in 2019 covered the 4 churchyards that already had transferred to the council, but also considered any closed churchyards that transferred post 2019. As members are aware, that position has changed since 2019, and in light of the cost of living pressures which Councillor Perry's alluded to, a revised decision will be presented to members this evening. I'll now take you through the options regarding the decision, firstly with the 2 elements that have not been considered to be taken forward as part of the decision. The first one of those is option 1, which was no change to the decision made in 2019. So that would involve the decision proceeding as was, that a special expense would be applied to all 4 closed churchyards should any maintenance or major repairs be required at those churchyards or any other churchyards that come on board in the future. Again, taking on board the current position regarding the cost of living crisis, that decision has not been one that Councillor Perry wishes to take forward and is not part of tonight's proposed recommendations. Option 3, again, which is a decision not included within the options, is to reverse the decision regarding the special expense. This would result in the full cost of repairs to any of those churchyards we've got responsibility for now, or any in the future falling to the South Staffordshire Council. This would inevitably impact on the MTFS position, and it may be necessary, if members took that route, to decide and looking at any services that may need to be stopped as a result of the council taking on untold, unknown liabilities into the future. So again, that option is not one Councillor Perry wishes to take forward tonight as part of the proposed decision. The proposed recommendation tonight, members, is option 2 within the report, which is still utilising the Section 35 legislation. However, to reflect the current economic position, Councillor Perry believes a more nuanced approach to that is required, and Councillor Perry is recommending that if a special expense is applied, a 2% cap would be applied to the special expense, which would see no resident's council tax bill increase within a financial year by more than 2%. Again, we feel that this is an equitable position by doing that, and that amount is then applied to every parish equitably in terms of their band across the district. Introducing a cap is likely to result in a shortfall in funding against major repair work, particularly in smaller parishes. If the amount recouped by the special expense, including the cap, does not cover the cost of repairs within a parish council area, Councillor Perry is recommending that South Staffordshire Council cover those costs which aren't covered by the funding brought in regarding the special expense. Again, as part of that, members, that must be caveated, the special expense would only be introduced if alternative funding mechanisms, including charitable donations, could be sourced to offset those costs. Again, there will therefore be an impact on the wider council budget position, as it's not known the number of churchyards that could transfer in the future, the level of work required to those churchyards, or when those churchyards may come across to us. Section 3.9, the table outlines what that cost would be by introducing a cap across all council tax band. The table indicates a 1% increase, a 2% increase, and a 3% increase. In terms of the recommendation, this evening, members, the 2% figure for an average band D property equates to £40.35 within a financial year. That is the band D average. However, each property would be charged the figure included in the table relevant to their individual council tax band. To work out what that figure would be in terms of a 2% increase, we've included within the table all the parish areas which contain closed churchyards across South Staffordshire. Any parishes that don't contain a churchyard or that may or may not be closed in the future have been removed from the table. So the table includes those churchyards that already have transferred to us, or any that may do so in the future that contain a burial ground. An example of how the special expense could be applied using the 2% cap is picked up in table 3.10. So if the 2% cap was applied in our smallest parish, which contains a burial ground at Enville, the council would generate £9,368 from the special expense. In our largest parish, Wombourne, that figure would be £211,000. So whilst Enville has the smallest council tax base, we do have a number of parishes where there's more than one closed churchyard within those patches. Again, that presents a significant risk within that parish, but also those parishes have got predominantly smaller council tax bases. Again, at this point in time, there is no more than one closed churchyard within a parish area, but if that situation arose, again, Councillor Perry would like that to be discussed at that point in time when it became a reality, and we were anticipating more than one closed churchyard within a parish area. Again, the inclusion of costs of major repairs by a special expense may cause an unacceptable increase in council tax, particularly within smaller parishes. Again, with the 2019 decision, there is the ability to split those costs over a maximum of a 2-year period following the year where the works have been completed. In considering option 2 and the financial implications to the council, what we would be proposing is those costs picked up by the council are capitalised. The council would capitalise those costs. And again, alongside that, what we're proposing is a sink fund would be established, which would help support future costs and reduce the future liabilities of the council. Again, we need to consider the options based on the current financial uncertainty, and any borrowing liabilities would have an impact on the council's MTFS and future borrowing and spending abilities. The figures that have been included within the report reflect £2,000, a cost of £2,000 being applied, and how that would be proportioned over 12 to 15 years, paying that funding back. Again, members, I must stress that that potentially is indicative of one closed churchyard. Should there be more, that cost increases on our borrowing. And again, looking at that in isolation, we're just considering closed churchyards cost. However, that doesn't include any other capital borrowing cost the council may incur in future years, such as our facilities and assets, any fleet costs that the council may incur in the future. So again, it's being mindful that yes, by capitalising the funding and paying it back over a longer period of time, the in-year cost is reduced. However, that is dependent on one closed churchyard potentially, but more churchyards and other liabilities will increase the financial risk to the council. And as John's already pointed out this evening, we're already drawing on reserves to fund the MTFS. The final consideration, members, as well, in terms of the routine grounds maintenance within those 4 churchyards within the district. South Staffordshire Council currently funds those costs from within our revenue budget. That equates to just under £30,000 per annum to carry out the maintenance in those closed churchyards, which includes grass cutting, shrub and tree maintenance within those closed churchyards. Again, key to note is currently those sites are maintained at the same levels as our 2 cemetery sites at Sitch Lane and Strawberry Lane in Great Worley. And within those closed churchyards, we also have a liability and a cost to ensure memorial testing is carried out within those sites. And again, if there is any work found where any memorials are unsafe in those sites, again, that falls for the district council to pick up those costs to mitigate any repairs. So again, that's just for context, members, that the decision tonight is in consideration as any maintenance and major costs that fall outside the general grounds maintenance to those sites. However, again, as part of Councillor Perry's recommendations, what we'd like to consider, as we do at the moment, those costs will be reviewed annually, and should additional churchyards transfer to South Staffordshire Council, the level of maintenance provided may be reviewed to reflect the work required within those churchyards, or if a significant amount of churchyards transferred to us, again, the special expense legislation could be applied to cover the costs of general maintenance within those sites. The final point before I hand back to Councillor Perry to take you through the recommendations is that Councillor Perry is also recommending that a policy is introduced that clarifies the council approach to the maintenance of closed churchyards, either the ones the council is responsible for now or any that may transfer to the council in the future. Thank you, members. I'll now pass back to Councillor Perry to take through her proposed decision.
Thank you, Mark, for taking us through the background. Members, I will now set out my proposed decision. I propose that a special expense under Section 35 of the Local Government Act is applied based on the 2019 decision. However, to reflect the current inflation and cost of living pressures the residents of South Staffordshire are facing, this figure will be capped at 2% of the resident's annual council tax bill. If the amount recouped does not cover the cost of repairs within the parish council area, any cost above the cap will be funded by South Staffordshire Council. I propose the council can, under the Section 35 legislation, also spread payments over a maximum of 2 years, and it is proposed to review repayment costs on a case-by-case basis. I propose that any outstanding costs of repairs not covered by this special expense and funded by South Staffordshire Council will be capitalised, subject to the nature of the work undertaken. In addition, a revenue sink fund of £25,000 per annum would also be created, which will be used to offset future costs and reduce the borrowing liabilities of the council. I propose that a policy will be introduced on the approach that South Staffordshire Council will take to the maintenance of any closed churchyards where the maintenance responsibility has transferred to South Staffordshire Council. Routine grounds maintenance of closed churchyards will continue to be reviewed annually, and should additional closed churchyards be passed to South Staffordshire Council, we reserve the right to review the standard of grounds maintenance provided or treat the costs for routine grounds maintenance and memorial testing under the special expense legislation. If more than one churchyard in a parish area becomes closed and the responsibility transfers to South Staffordshire District Council, the decision will be reviewed to reflect the changing circumstances at that point in time. That is my proposed decision, members. But members, in considering these proposals, I must reiterate once again that this is a South Staffordshire-wide decision, and I have brought these proposals forward for scrutiny on a voluntary basis, as I wish for all members to have the opportunity to give their views. Thank you. Over to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Right, members, do you have any questions? Any questions?
Sorry,
Councillor
thank you,
Harrison.
Chairman.
Yeah.
It was just a quick question to make sure I've understood the situation correctly, which is entirely possible that I might not have done. Mark was talking about 2% per financial year, but then with the cost being spread potentially for residents over 2 years, does that mean that actually they're at risk of paying 2% in the following year as well? It just wasn't quite clear from documentation. My suspicion was that that wasn't the case, but the way you talked about it just made me slightly anxious.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Yes, your interpretation is correct. If the council finance those work and split the cost over 2 years, it wouldn't then be fair of us to charge residents that 2% each year, as we would have already funded those costs. So it would be over the year of the work, so we wouldn't be charging 2% again on the 2 years.
How long has the legislation been in place that has forced us to take on maintenance of churchyards been in place? How many years has it been?
So the legislation that provides for the transfer of the maintenance of closed churchyards from the parochial church council to the parish council to the district council was introduced under section 215 of the Local Government Act 1972. So in effect since then.
Further question?
When was the first churchyard taken on by South Staffordshire?
Thank you, Councillor Harper-Wallace. The first churchyard which is taken on by South Staffordshire Council was St Benedict's Churchyard in Wombourne in 2007.
Do we have any further questions? Councillor Cope.
Yes, Chairman. I'd like some guidance actually to explain my situation. I'm leader of the independent group. Councillor Penny Allen obviously isn't able to speak because she's declared that interest, but she has asked me to make a statement that involves a question within the statement. Now, I know procedure is that we go to questions and then debate, but I'd like to read this out of what Penny Allen's asked me to put. Do I ask that now, or do we put it into debate? Guidance, please.
I think, Councillor Cope, if there is a question, then you should be asking that question now, because this is the question section, and then obviously we'll move on to debate after that.
Okay, I'll put the questions at exactly what she's asked me to ask. She is asking that the financial implications of the closed churchyards be fully explored and any decisions made to be brought back to the full council with a policy which has explored the concerns of local residents. The impact on our reserves, she wants to know that, which are always greater than we have expected, should be fully understood before any charging is made, and a fund to meet those expenses should be established. Now, obviously, what we've just heard, Mark and Councillor Perry have actually stated part of what's within that question. Where this is awkward is it would have been wise, really, for Councillor Perry to have been in the room to have heard Mark's statement and Councillor Perry's, because it does answer some of those questions. But she was concerned tonight that these questions would not be put to this committee. So I presume Councillor Perry is going to either listen to this recording, or can you make a statement to Councillor Perry on those particular questions? Guidance, please.
I assume you mean Councillor Allen rather than Councillor Perry will watch the recording. Sorry, you said Councillor Perry, but obviously she's. Yes, absolutely. The recording will be uploaded to YouTube, as all recordings are, so that will be made available. So hopefully that will address those issues. But I'm sure if there's specific questions want to be put forward outside of the meeting, then Mark would be more than happy to answer those directly.
Thank you for that. I think the rest of what I want to input into this meeting needs to be in the debate, but I want to probe some of the options that there could be other options other than what has been proposed by Councillor Perry. In other words, an amendment to what was proposed. So I'll pick that up in the debate. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I was late to this, so I apologise, Mark, for coming in. I'm sort of missing your statement. Just for my own mind, the repairs, is that repairs over an annual period, or is it literally per repair? Say, wall falls down, it's going to cost 20 grand or whatever it is to repair it. It's 2%, that figure is capped at 2%. And then if something else happens later in the year, or is it repairs that are done for the whole 12-month period, is then looked at 2% after that period? Is it 2% per repair, or is it, because obviously things can happen throughout the year multiple times?
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Yes, it would be relevant to the repair. For instance, you took a closed churchyard. Now there was 10 elements of work which were required to it. We have to go for a faculty application process to carry out that work, which may or may not be agreed by the local parochial church. If, for instance, say they only agree to 4 of those elements, that means there's still going to be further work that's required to be done in the future. So the 2% would be applied on the work that's allowed to be undertaken. Again, if the subsequent work in future years, that would be applied. And again, as with any asset, there's likely to be further costs in the future. So even if all the repair work was undertaken, there could be a point in 10, 15 years time where further works are required to be undertaken. So it would be applied each time there's an expense and work required at a closed churchyard.
Just
Councillor Duncan.
Sorry, can I just follow up
sorry.
on that?
Okay.
Just again, sorry, Mike, just for my own mind, what it says, so if multiple, say, repairs are done at the start of the year and they're agreed for a certain cost, and more repairs are done at the end of the year, again, separately to what was done at the start, would it be then 2% again of that figure that will be passed to residents, or are we now looking at a combined 4% being charged to residents? Does that make sense?
So any work undertaken, we didn't take in the financial year pre the special expense being opposed. So that would be agreed, that would be charged at 2%. Any other work within that year probably would be unlikely because it wouldn't be agreed at that point in time as the faculty agreement. So it would be likely the work's undertaken, completed, the special expense is applied. Any subsequent work that come forward would likely to be in the following year after that. So it would be 2% in year, not a 4% in one year period.
Councillor Duncan first.
Okay, two small questions. I take it this new charge will appear in the normal tax bills going forward. This is my first question. And the second question I've got is, going forward in few years, if some more passes, whatever, is there a potential that this 2% will increase? That's my two questions.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Yes, it would go within the council tax and it would appear as a line as a special expense. But again, that would only be applied in the parish area where those repairs are required. It wouldn't be apportioned across the rest of the tax base. And again, at the second point, the decision today, Councillor Perry's put forward as part of a proposal is regarding 2%. Again, in future years, it may be looked at again, but this evening, the proposed decision put forward is based on the 2% increase.
Councillor Harper-Wallis.
So in the situation that you mentioned before, could there be a situation where one parish has got some works done that go over a 2-year span at 2%, and then the following year there's some further repairs, and then a special expense is then put on year 2 of that plan, so they're actually paying then the 4%? Could that be a possibility?
It could be. It very much depend, Councillor Harper Wallace, if new works were found. If we, the council in conjunction with the local church, went out and identified works, we would put proposals forward to complete all those works. However, we can't control that. Ultimately, that decision sits with the local parochial church council, have to decide whether they feel that work's necessary. Again, that then goes up to the local Lichfield Diocese Committee, who will look at that and make those decisions. So, for instance, if it was decided that all those works weren't allowed to be carried out, we've identified that they need doing, so yes, they could go back into a subsequent year if they weren't undertaken in one go.
Councillor Dufty.
Thank you. So when works are decided, how would that be communicated to the residents of the parish that would then have that capped special expense issued?
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. The first approach is that if any closed churchyard that comes over to us, a survey would be undertaken regarding the condition of that closed churchyard. At that point in time, any works identified would be relayed to the local parochial church council in terms of recommendations of what work is undertaken. Again, as part of the previous point, we may or may not be permitted to undertake that work at those sites. Once an agreed position is reached in terms of what work would be carried out in those sites, under this decision, we would then write to the residents in those parishes confirming the cost, when and how that would be applied over those subsequent financial years.
So just for clarity then, Mark, moving forward from this position under the new proposal, the findings of the survey, when the churchyard becomes the responsibility of the district council, would be shared with the residents, and the costs wouldn't be shared until it had been passed by faculty. Have I got that the right way around?
So yeah, at the point, we would share the costs in terms of what work's been permitted under the faculty. So we might have an area of work picked up. Again, depending on what is agreed as part of the faculty licence, we would be only sharing what work could be funded and is allowed to be funded under the faculty agreement.
In the same vein of communication, if this policy goes through, will we be communicating it to residents? Because effectively we're saying there's a risk that you're going to get a council tax. So will we be writing to all residents if this decision is made?
I'll just make a point. What I intend to do tonight, which I should have said earlier, tonight I'll listen to your views, your suggestions and recommendations on this matter. But this is a cabinet member decision, and my decision may or may not be altered based on tonight's proceedings. I will issue my final decision on this matter once your comments have been duly considered. Okay? Thank you.
Councillor Harper Wallace.
Will that decision then be communicated to parish residents or residents across the district in some way or form?
Sorry.
So in legal terms, once the cabinet member has made the decision, that is automatically uploaded onto our website. So it's publicly viewable once the decision has been confirmed. In fact, the draft decision is on there now, but then it will go on as a final decision once the decision's been made. And then obviously, depending on the decision tonight, there will be a policy drafted, and then that policy will be published as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Again, apologies, Mark, if you have covered this. Just confusion in the back and forth there. Where does the liability sit for the site? For example, if someone's to have an accident or an injury on the site, if we're saying works are to be done, but it's someone else's responsibility to say whether them works can be carried out, where does the liability sit, or whose insurance is going to cover that?
It sits with us. So the liability, because we are responsible for the maintenance of the closed churchyard under the Occupiers Liability Acts, we have that responsibility. We also have responsibility under health and safety legislation. So because we undertake that maintenance, the liability rests with us. Now, clearly, there is an argument as to joining in other parties if that is appropriate in any proceedings, but ultimately it would be for the district council liability.
So just to come back on that then, so if the clerical group, I'm not going to pretend to understand all the different parts, say we don't want that work done this year, can it be done next year? And then someone was to have can we override that?
No, Councillor Fisher, we can't. And as Lorraine picked up, potentially if we've recommended work needs to be done, and for whatever reason it's decided it's not, potentially then that party will be called forward as a co-defendant with the council in a court of law.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay. Does anybody wish to debate it? Surprise, surprise. Who wants to go first? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak on this matter. So, for members' benefit and the benefit of the general public watching this, there's a bit of background. Pre-May local elections, this Conservative-led council decided to impose a special tax on the Kimber residents to pay for their church wall repairs, using a mechanism, as spoken about, implemented in 2019. This was led by former councillor Len Bates, writing to Kimber residents to inform them of the £70 plus additional special charge they'll face to pay for the church wall repairs. Thankfully, in Kimber, there were 3 active campaigners, backed by an amazing group of residents that stood against the wall charge. Come May's election, the Conservatives were completely wiped out of Kimber and Enville. The residents had spoken and they've made it clear that they didn't support this completely unfair tax. Today, we're seeing the results of that campaign, with the Conservatives rolling back on their plan and implementing this paper, which proposes a change to the mechanism in the form of capped costs or spreading the costs over 2 years. However, they've made a clear oversight. Instead of taking the special charges off the table and budgeting like a fiscally competent and responsible council would do, they've decided to spread the special threat of special charges to every resident who resides in a parish across the whole district. So, members, I ask myself why. But then I remember back to May's election campaigns, and specifically the Conservative election leaflets. These leaflets had the following pledges all over them. We plan to keep council tax low. So there you have it. It's a political decision from this administration has resulted in no budgeting or maintenance, budgeting for the maintenance, so as to keep the tax figures low so we can make the claim on the leaflets. This financial incompetence has put us in a very difficult situation. In 2017, when a church wall fell into a garden, this administration had the opportunity to be financially prudent and place funds into a reserve each year to cover the cost of future maintenance. Instead, they chose not to do this to give the false impression of low council tax. I wonder if in next election leaflet, the Conservatives will also include any special charges when calculating how low our council tax really is. The irony is there was also a pledge to support families during a cost of living crisis. I'm not sure how a special council tax charge aligns with this pledge. Setting aside the financial mismanagement, there is also an important point to be made around fairness. When our leisure centres need reservations or maintenance work, where does that budget come from? The council tax. When districts...
Councillor, can I just stop you? You're making a statement, you're not actually contributing to a debate. You're talking about something that's happened in the past. If you can just focus your attention on tonight's agenda, please.
Okay, so I'll move forward then. So when our leisure centres need renovations, where does that budget come from? It comes from council tax. When our district's grass verges and green spaces need to be cut. I think it's important to the point because I'm talking about the reasoning for my argument and setting forward, why this is unfair.
I'm not quite sure what leisure centres have got to do with tonight's agenda.
The leisure centre, if they need maintenance...
Can we get back to the agenda, please?
Absolutely. So my argument is that if we share the cost of leisure centres across the district, I don't understand why we wouldn't do that for church walls, why that isn't fair. If the Cabinet believes that this decision is fair, then why can we not? Then they should extend their hyper-localised taxes to other spending commitments such as grass verges and leisure centres. We could take this as far as little as we want to. We could potentially charge residents a tax if they live in the vicinity of a leisure centre. So I completely understand the district by law has to maintain these churchyards, and we're not going to change anything here. However, I still think that there's some inherent unfairness to this legislation where we are making residents of other faiths or no faiths pay for a church wall. But like I said, we're not going to change that legislation here today. I do want to speak to the members of this council. Effectively, we're here today offering an olive branch. You know, ask yourselves how residents will react to having to pay a special tax expense because of financial mismanagement. We're putting people before the politics here. We're getting rid of the political time bomb, because if that bomb goes off, you will lose your seats. Moving forward, we should be doing the right thing. I'm asking the Cabinet to take their decision back to the drawing board, involve all members on potential solutions, and find a route that shares the cost across the district. Then, moving forward, we should budget appropriately each year into our reserves to ensure that we aren't in this situation again. And I know that my colleagues also have other comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cope, did you want to speak?
Yeah, it's to make an observation. What I don't want to do is make this a rallying cry for political parties. I'm an independent. I'm an independent. We're here tonight to make a decision, the way forward for the benefit of all our residents. I don't like this attitude about people lose their seats, etc. And I think the public will see straight through that. So if I can just contribute to the conversation, please. What is being proposed here is to prevent the impact on the council's actual budget, our district council's budget. But I also have to wear two hats. I'm chairman of a parish council, Shareshill Parish Council. So I wear one hat as a parish councillor, one hat as a district councillor. So what I'm looking for is some sort of compromise to look at the responsibilities of both the parish and the district. Now, Councillor Perry mentioned there would be a policy of a fund of £25,000. Often we talk at this council about our council being the 5th lowest council tax collecting authority in the country. We're much lower than some of the other authorities across South Staffordshire. So when I talk about this compromise, the problem I've got with Shareshill is that Shareshill Church, Shareshill Parish Council would take the responsibility, but the church actually services 4 parishes, Featherstone, Ilton and Sarden. Now, in our burial ground, 80% of the people buried are from Featherstone. With this proposal, there'll be no responsibility on any of the 3 other parish councils to contribute if that churchyard has to close. I can understand the dilemma because I spoke to Lorraine folks at lunchtime. It's all about the law on this section 35, where it can only be levied against the parish of which the church is in. Now, when it comes up every year at our parish council of what to increase our parish ground precept by, we usually average about 3% because it's reasonable. And that's usually an average across the board. Some parishes levy more than that if they've got a project they want to finance. But if we're already levying 2% plus the parish is 3%, I think that's too much. And what I'm looking at the middle ground here is that I'm proposing 1%, not 2%, because 1% of 3%, if that's what the parish was doing, is 1/3 going to this fund and 2/3 to the parish precept. 2% would be 2/3 to this fund, only 1/3 to the parish precept. So if you grasp my maths on that. So I think there's a middle ground here where I'd like to amend it down to 1%. And if necessary, as we go along and look at this fund, we increase that £25,000 fund, bearing in mind that we've always been the lowest tax authority across the district. We can always adjust that as we go along. So I'm looking for a middle ground compromise. This won't apply to all the members across the council because some of them are exempt. My example in my parish won't affect the Featherstone councillors, John Brindle, because they won't have to levy that on their parish. So that's my proposal, that let's look for that middle ground and let's see some sense in all of this that satisfies the general public that we've been reasonable in what we're asking and that protects both authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cope. I'm sure that Councillor Perry will take away your comments, which is the purpose. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk on this issue. Many of you will be aware that this was a major issue during our recent election campaign, and I've already alluded to that fact in the start of the meeting when I discussed potential conflicts of interest and declarations of interest, as it were. Obviously, we had grave concerns around the original proposal that was in place as at the end of last year. But of course, as a result of that election, you now have the rather dubious pleasure, and you do have my sympathy on this, of having to listen to me tonight, but I shall try and make it fairly brief. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the work that Councillor Perry and council officers have done on this particular issue. It is most welcome. I think the new proposal is a great improvement over the situation that we found ourselves in previously. I'm not yet convinced it fully moves us to what I would regard as a fair situation, but I think it does work. It is worth, and it's my responsibility to just credit the work that's been done so far. I'd also like to credit the comments that Councillor Cope has just made, which I think were very sensible and well thought through. So you've heard a lot of the background to this issue, and I think it's worth saying that no council would like to find itself in this kind of situation, and I genuinely sympathise with that. This is difficult, and there is no simple, easy way out of this problem. However, it is worth pointing out that the reputation of South Staff Council within our ward has certainly hit rock bottom over this issue, and probably there are lessons to be learned about how it was handled, etc., going forward. That's not for a discussion tonight. That's just an observation. I'm trying to give members some of the background to it and understanding why I'm here and why I feel so passionately about this. So clearly, without careful handling of this situation, I think the outcry, which I think is not an overstatement, that occurred in Kinver is at risk of being repeated in other council areas. Swindon, Womborne, Coven, where they already have closed churchyards, are obvious examples. But I speak as a doctor here. Sadly, we have to acknowledge the fact that all things come to an end and more churchyards are going to close as they become full. So as Councillor Perry pointed out, this is an issue that sooner or later is going to affect the majority of South Staffordshire. However, I do think that we need to find a solution that is fair. Councillor Parry and Councillor Lees have both pointed out the need for a solution that is seen to be fair to everyone, as far as that is ever possible. And I absolutely support that. However, the current proposal, I still feel, is somewhat unfair to the residents of Kinver and potentially to the residents of other parishes going forward. And I think it's this unfairness that is the heart of my concerns. Now, why do I say that? Well, it's already been alluded to that actually this actual issue started last century when the legislation was put in place, and it goes back to 2007, really, when the first churchyard was closed and passed over to this council. Now, there's no point going over ancient history to any great extent, but there was an opportunity that was missed to take some planning at that point and put together a sink fund, I think Mark referred to it, so that these eventualities could be dealt with. And then we wouldn't have been in this position now. So I certainly endorse that as a concept going forward. I think you can argue about what the size of that sink fund should be. And no doubt that's a decision and a discussion that the Cabinet will have to have with the council officers. However, if there had been a sink fund, then we wouldn't be in this position. It would have easily covered by now, without a shadow of a doubt, because we're talking about what would have effectively been a very minimal amount of money affecting each council property or council residence property across South Staffordshire. And it would have covered the work in Swindon easily. And the work in Swindon is part of the problem why I'm raising the unfairness issue. Now, when Swindon Churchyard needed repairing, it was repaired at a cost of around £80,000, entirely out of council funds. Personally, I think that was quite a reasonable decision. I have no problem with that whatsoever. However, that does mean that all residents of South Staffordshire, one way or another, contributed to that cost, including the residents of Kinver. there was no expectation or demand of residents in Swindon to pay a penny extra themselves. Now, as I say, I agree with that decision. But now we're asking residents of the parish next doors to Swindon to put their hands in their own pockets to pay for their own church. There doesn't seem to be a reciprocity there. This doesn't seem fair. I think there are other reasons why this isn't unfair, and some of this also harks back to some of the comments that Councillor Cope has made. So I think within our parish, the problem is that the parish and that's the ecclesiastical parish and the civil parish do not overlap entirely. So we are asking about 140 properties within our parish to pay for a church that they're not even part of the parish of. They're not even in the same diocese. They're in the Diocese of Worcestershire, not the Diocese of Lichfield. They have no relationship with that church whatsoever. They live closer to several other churches than they do to Kinver Church. And yet, because of this difference between civic parishes and ecclesiastical parishes, they are being not given the option at the moment of paying for the upkeep of that church. That will be repeated inevitably across other parishes as well. And of course, as has already been alluded to, there are some parishes that have more than one church. So I think there's a degree of unfairness there that's inherent in this. I feel that if the plan is implemented as is, then the sense of injustice will remain. The cap and spread of payments over 2 years, the sink fund as it's been described as, I think are all very positive moves, and I think are all helpful. However, I would point out to members that the actual estimated cost that was in the letter that was sent out just before Christmas last year to Kinver residents, the estimated cost per household in that is exactly the same, pretty much, give or take £1 or £2, as the cost with a 2% cap. So in other words, whilst these policy changes are very welcome and I think good, in practical terms, it makes no difference to the residents of Kinver. So I think that sense of injustice and lack of fairness is going to persist for a little longer. So what I would say to you, councillors and members, is actually, I implore you to consider supporting a fair option for all our residents across South Staffordshire. I don't think we're quite there yet. So I do think that we should ask the Cabinet, as indeed Councillor Cope has done, to just reconsider whether there's a way of making this fairer for all concerned. Thank you very much. I do apologise for talking for so long.
Thank you for your contribution. I'm sure that Councillor Perry will take that on board. Do we have any further contributions? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. And thank you, Councillor Perry, for bringing this to overview and scrutiny as well, and for giving us the time to talk. I don't want to repeat points that have already been made. I've been editing bits out on here as well. As you know, you don't want to hear it all again at the same time. I do want to pick up on some points that Councillor Cope's actually said, and Councillor Harrison. And looking firstly at the financial management, there were questions asked earlier. You know, the legislation has been in place for 51 years. For 16 years, we've had responsibility for closed churchyards here. Doing the maths, 2007 was the first one, the first closed churchyard at Wombourne. And I have to say, from option 2, which Councillor Perry is putting to us today, I really do welcome some aspects of that, and I do welcome the aspect, as Councillor Cope said, about the sink fund, and I do ask myself the question, harking into the past, but why wasn't that planned for before? If it had been planned for to have an earmarked fund, we see that terminology a lot. It's referenced a lot in the first paper and the report that John and Jackie took us through. earmarked funds are earmarked for purpose, for prudence, for financial management when you've got a risk and you think you might need it. And it's really helped out in the financial reports that John's taken us through that's protected the council, and that's why the quarterly picture looked healthier and the RAG rating was good. And I just wonder why that hasn't happened before. If it had happened in 2019, and if the council had put away £25,000 a year, which is what Councillor Perry is proposing, we'd have had 100,000 in reserves by now. And that's substantial, isn't it? I mean, and if it had happened from 2007, we'd actually have, oh gosh, I've written it down somewhere, 320,000, and that's actually taking away the 80,000 costs, £80,000 that nobody expected, but it did turn out to be for Swindon. But the council would have been prepared. So I really welcome that aspect of option 2. And I wonder, is it possible, I don't know, to maybe take that bit forward and use the reserves? We know we've got some cost coming up in Kimber. Obviously, I don't need to hark on that. But use the reserves and backfill it with the money that the council has already said they can budget for. Could that not even be considered to go into district-wide council tax? I did a little bit of maths. I'm not an accountant, but looking at I think it's page 56 in the pack, where the tax base is listed, and you can all see how it affects your parishes, and it's vastly different. And Councillor Perry has shown us very, very clearly the difference between Enville and Wombourne, and it's huge, absolutely huge. You know, Enville will be charged the full cap. Wombourne highly likely wouldn't. They have a far smaller wall than St Peter's for a start, but, you know, we're all different. It would only be, if you look at those numbers, and I rounded it up, it's about 28,000 on the tax base, less than 89 pence per year per household to accumulate that £25,000. And so actually, if it was across all the households, because in that table, that is just for the parishes that have a Church of England church, obviously, that's what the paper's for, it'll actually be less than that. Less than 89 pence per household in order to distribute the finance across the district. I just feel that that's fairer. I feel that's fairer because of the reasons that Councillor Harrison's pointed out. And if I might just add one reason there that only occurred to me whilst I was writing this, that I'm not reading, and I spent so much time doing it, but it occurred to me about use. It isn't just about where you live, which Councillor Harrison's talked about and given you figures on that for how it affects us. It was really interesting to hear Councillor Cope say about how the distribution is different and the church is in one ward, but it's used by parishioners of another ward. I hadn't considered that because that doesn't affect us in Kimber. I used to live in Wombourne, born and bred in Wombourne. I moved to Kimber 10 years ago. All of my family and friends that have died are in St Benedict Biscop Churchyard in Wombourne, and that's where I visit them reasonably regularly. I don't have any family in St Peter's in Kimber. I don't actually really have any affiliation to St Peter's in Kimber, other than the fact that I live in Kimber. My affiliation is to St Benedict's. I went to St Benedict Biscop Primary School, and I go to St Benedict Biscop Church services. I occasionally go to St Peter's because I live in St Peter's, and I have to be honest, maybe a bit more so now. I'm not an especially, I don't go to church regularly, but I have got a church education, and I just wonder, I wouldn't be asked to pay for Wombourne because I don't live there, but I use it. It doesn't seem completely fair to me. So there's some aspects of option 2 I welcome. I'd obviously welcome option 3 completely, but we do need to be, the council's between a rock and a hard place. A decision has to be made, responsibility has to be taken, and with the minimum fuss and fallout, I think would be the best way forward for this council. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you. I've listened with interest. I refer to the docket that we've been, or part of the document that we've been provided for this evening's meeting. I'm not very good at the should have, we could have, we might have done something. I'm looking at what we should do now, or what we could do now. As one of the representatives of one of the largest wards, or the largest ward in this district, we have 6 churches. At the moment, one of ours has been adopted. It's more than likely that 2 or 3 are going to also be adopted in coming years. It's a concern whether we get a 2% for each church, which I want to sort of have some clarity on, but I'm sure Councillor Perry will help us on that one. One of the things that concerns me is the commentary on page 48 of your docket around the transfer under section 215 of the 1972 legislation, which suggests that the churchyard should be transferred in a decent order and with its walls and fences in good repair. However, this is then sort of considered as there is currently little in the way of legal basis to ensure this is the case. We're a leading council. We win awards. We've won lots of awards. Perhaps we ought to, as another branch of this conversation, start looking at what challenge we are going to have. We are conscious as South Staffs district councillors that we are responsible for the financial regularity and the financial prudence of this council. One of the things that we need to do is to ensure that future financial prudence. Yes, we should have done this in 2007 and had a 25k sink fund. We didn't. We are where we are today. However, we all appreciate that in the future, this isn't just a 2% on one parish. It could be a 2% charge on 27 parishes. So let's start challenging this section 215, this 51-year-old piece of legislation, and ask, hang on a sec, you're asking us, and we aren't the only council going to be asking these questions, you're asking us to accept this. We want a proper repair maintenance programme before we take it on, or we will take it to court. So we need to explore that avenue as well. It's probably already been done, but I do feel as councillors, we ought to look for that prudence for the future, as well as looking at what we're doing now. And option 2, am I comfortable with it? Is it something I'm comfortable to sell to my residents in Coven and Brood and Blimmel and Printon and Weston under Lizard? No. But are we, as you suggested, Councillor Dufty, sorry, I can't read it from here. Councillor Dufty, is that we have to do something. But I think we need another arm to this docket, Councillor Perry, around looking at how we explore that legality. And if that's via the LGA, because a lot of councils are going to be doing the same conversation or having the same conversation as we are tonight, perhaps it's something we ought to explore. That's my contribution to this debate.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further comments? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. And I obviously want to thank Councillor Perry for bringing this to overview scrutiny voluntarily to listen to concerns. I don't think there's any going to be a perfect solution that's going to please everyone, as with most issues. I can see the need that something needs to be done just on the health and safety issues that we spoke about earlier that the council is going to be liable for. I'm not sure we have the perfect solution or the best solution yet, in the fact that I do think any repairs, any cap should be applied cumulatively over a yearly period, regardless to what repairs are carried out in that time, rather than per repair. And I'm a bit uneasy regarding £10,000 worth of work in one parish, which may be quite large, is so much per household, but £10,000 in a smaller parish is obviously going to affect them residents a lot more for the same value of work. So effectively, we're creating a postcode lottery within our own district. And that's a bit, which I'm not saying I have the solution for, I'm just saying that's sitting a bit uneasy at the minute. And that element of it doesn't seem quite fair to me for the same value work. So I'm not saying I have the solution, listening to obviously the debate so far, but I do think a little more needs to be looked at to make it a little bit fairer. for everyone across the district.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cope.
Just a quick observation on what Councillor Sutton said. She said 2% on over 27 parishes. It won't be released because it's levied on the parishes that have the church within the parish. I agree with what Wendy Sutton says. She's talking about LGA, but our hands are tied because of this section 35. The law says it's got to be the parish where the church is. So using a word that was used earlier on, it's not equitable, and the pain is going to be suffered by the parish where the church actually is. That's why I was looking for that compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just wonder, there have been various sort of conversations, obviously, around the chamber today, and I just wonder what sort of support there might be if it was a 1% increase, just so we can give an indication across this council chamber to the cabinet member. So if you feel that it's a 1%, can we have an informal show of hands, please? It's not.
Well, can we link that to the sink fund first?
No, we're not taking about this. It's just an informal indication to give the cabinet member an indication as to which way she should be considering the way forward.
Isn't that prejudging things? I mean, surely the democracy of this is to go back to cabinet, discuss everything. That's why they are the cabinet. I know which way this is now going, that it's not going to be considered. So, yeah, I'm wasting my breath. Thank you.
Councillor Fisher.
But just further comments on that. I mean, as I said, solution-wise for me, we're not fully there in the fact that whatever the percentage is, when we're applying charges, this is just my point of view, obviously, when we're applying special charges saying we can't afford certain things, that's going to cause wider challenge in actually how the council is spending its money in all areas. And people will look closer at how the council is spending its money. They will see certain things as wasteful, in their opinion. And for me, I'm not sure if we're quite there on a percentage yet. I'm still trying to decide if this actual applying a special charge is the right way to go about it, and I'm just not convinced on that yet.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Fisher. We've had comments around the chamber. Has anybody else got any further comments to make? Okay.
Does this only apply to Church of England burial? Well, that's not very fair, is it?
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the conversation with interest, actually, and some very good points have been made, I think, by several councillors and members, which I was quite impressed by. I would just echo Councillor Fisher's point, really, that I think we have made big improvements compared to where we were with the original decision in 2019. And I would reiterate my personal thanks to Councillor Perry and others who've worked on this. And that does need to be recognised, and I'm sure most members in this room would recognise that. I think we haven't quite got it over the line from my perspective, but I think we're a heck of a lot closer than I perhaps thought we would be a few months ago. And I'm trying to say that as words of encouragement, if you like, that I think progress has been made. I think this is possible to get a fairer solution than we have now. I would support anything that's as fair as possible. We have got to sort this out. It isn't fair that the council has this responsibility thrust upon it. I'm very sympathetic to that. I suspect most people in the room would be as well. I think I would just leave it there. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Perry, would you like to come back in?
Yes, please, if you don't mind, Chairman. I'd like to thank you all. We've listened intently to what you've had to say. Thank you very much for your contribution this evening. As I said, I was going to have this meeting to listen to what you'd got to say and take back. I'm not going to make any decisions until we've had a look with officers at the subjects that you've raised. Can I also say I'm pleased to see that the other cabinet members are sitting in the room as well, so they've taken on board, I'm sure, all the things that you've had to say. I think that's all I've got to say at this moment in time. I've listened intently. We've made some notes between us of what you've had to say. We will go away and have a look now and then come up with something that we'll send out to you. I'm not going to say when. It'll be in the next when we've had time and the chance to digest what you've had to say, and we will send it out to you first and see what the position is from there, if that's okay with everybody, members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. There is a recommendation, and that is that members consider the proposed decision attached in Appendix 1 regarding the revision of the 2019 decision made on this matter. Are we all content with that? Okay, thank you. Moving on now to agenda item 6, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Rural England Prosperity Fund. And I think this is with Annette Roberts, is it?
Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, sorry. So, excuse me, I do apologise. Can we find Councillor Allen? Welcome back, Councillor Allen. And then we're going to move on to item 6, Councillor Allen, on the agenda, and that's going to be taken by Annette Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman. So as members, you'll recall the earlier briefing and discussions on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund as the project plan was being developed and drawn up. And we brought this to you over the last sort of 12, 18 months. Members will also recall that the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is a central pillar of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund levelling up agenda, and that we were allocated £3.8 million revenue and capital across 3 spend years, and we're currently in the 2nd spend year. Now, to unlock that 3.8 million, what we had to do was to prepare an investment plan. And members, I'm sure you'll recall when we brought an all-member briefing to you on that our investment plan focused on our existing council priorities, and that was created in consultation with members and also with partners. And these were, in broad terms, and trying to bring this to life really, strong effective package of business support, building on what we've previously done in terms of particularly through COVID and building on that piece of work, skills support for employment for our own residents, investment in our villages, environmental improvements across the district, decarbonising our assets and extending the warmer homes activity that's currently underway, and active travel. So after we prepared that investment plan, we submitted it to government, and the government approved our plan in December 2022. Paragraph 3.5 of the report before you tonight details the governance that has been set up to deliver for this. We were also identified to be a recipient of £4,890 of rural funding, and not all local authorities across the country were, but given our rural status, that was allocated to us as South Staffordshire District Council, so it's been dealt with in a similar vein. This brings the total value of the total pot to 4.3 million. So in March 2023, the Cabinet approved a new governance structure to allow the Council to deliver at pace with set parameters, but to allow sufficient robust challenges from members and, of course, partners in delivering this important fund. And Appendix A sets out this governance structure. Now, as we only received confirmation of our investment plan in December 22, our spend so far is not significant. However, the government are reassured by our credible spending plans, and we've been able to unlock the 2023-2024 spending allocation already. Nevertheless, year 1 spend began before the end of the first year, and Landywood Enterprise decarbonisation project and the High Street appraisal work has been commissioned and has commenced. Indeed, also creating brighter futures creates opportunities for the longer term unemployed, but also for those who may have recently lost work and who may need assistance to retrain. You will see that there are strong links between the people and skills element of the plan and the support of business, supporting business activities. Members will also know that there is also, of the whole UK Share Prosperity Fund, £1.2 million worth of residual funding for organisations to bid into, and members are encouraged to engage with officers if they are aware of funding bids within their wards and within their areas and parishes. These projects and funding pots are being advertised now, and I'm sure you'll have seen them on Facebook and LinkedIn and across all our social media channels. And they're starting to gain interest from communities and businesses to future the economic and social well-being of the district in line with the Council's plans and the government's requirements for the UK Share Prosperity Fund. So the recommendations then, members and chair, is that the members note the content of the UK Share Prosperity Fund and the Rural Prosperity Fund and the progress that's been made to date. I'm happy to take any questions. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. Be pleased to know my rush to get here. I haven't got my notes, so I'm not going to bore you. But it's just, I did just want to say, obviously, that I appreciate and I'm glad to see the twice yearly reporting to overview scrutiny and welcoming scrutiny that's written into that UK Share Prosperity. Obviously, that's something that I'm a big champion of in that transparency of it. The only quick question I've got is regarding the projects that are already listed. Can we have that sent out to us as the spreadsheet so we can actually read it properly in a single line? Because it is quite difficult to read when it's split across so many pages. And that's my only question at this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any further questions? Councillor Adler.
Thank you. I'm looking at 4.1 and 4.2, and I see that the government's expecting to take some impact assessments from this. I'm assuming those impact assessments can also be seen by us first, please, before they're submitted for the government surveys. Thank you.
I'm going to say, is that the response?
Fine, that's sorry, absolutely fine. Yes, they can be shared.
Do we have any further questions? No? Does anybody wish to debate it? No? Well, there is a recommendation, and it is recommended that members note the contents of the UK Share Prosperity Fund and Rural England's Prosperity Fund report and the progress made to date. Are we all content? Thank you. Moving on to item 7, South Staffordshire Place Narrative 2023, report of the Corporate Policy Manager, while the Assistant Director of Partnerships, Claudia Peterson.
It's quite scary because I've been left in charge of the digital and it isn't working, so apologies. Is it up? Oh, okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Good evening, members. Okay, this is our second place narrative. We produced the first one back in 2018. And I just wanted to give you a bit of background, really, about the narrative and also the locality profiles. So what we do with the profiles is they provide data across a range of data sets, and that's from health, economy, etc. And we do this in the form of charts, graphs and tables. But what the narrative does is provide a synopsis of the data. So it pulls all the headlines together under a people and place narrative, basically. We use both of these documents, so the narrative and the profiles, to inform the next council plan. And as you're all aware, we'll shortly start work on that in the next few months. So just the presentation just takes you through a few headlines from the narrative. So I know you've already seen the narrative, so some of these stats that I'm going to run through will be familiar with you. So firstly, we have seen a small increase in our population since the last census, around 2.2%. And it's a smaller increase than both the regional and the national averages. When we break this data down, which we do in the profile, also not in the narrative, further to localities, we can see that one of our localities has actually seen a decline in population. That's locality 4 that you're in at the moment, and that's of around 2.4%. So like I say, going back, the narrative gives you the overview, and the profiles will break the data down further to localities and also to villages where possible. So we've known for a while that our population is ageing, and the latest census data really brings this message out loud and clear, with around 25% of our population being in the 64 plus age bracket. We see a different trend, however, when we look at our younger population, where we've got a lower proportion of people aged 19 and under compared to regional and national averages. Our adults with excess weight figures are higher than regional and national averages, and again, this is something we've been aware of for some time. We see a similar trend in excess weight where our children are concerned, and this is kind of measured at 2 key points in our young people's development. So the first point is the 4 to 5 years, and this is where our levels of obesity here in South Staffordshire are lower than the West Midlands figure, but equal to the English average. And the second measure for young people is the 10 to 11 years, and that's where we're lower than the regional average and higher than the national. I did want to end the people slide though on a positive note, and that's just to say our maternity and healthy pregnancy rates are good, and we have low infant mortality rates. In the document, you've got much more data. Like I said, just taking you through some of the headlines. So moving on to our place, it's a question that we've frequently asked in our surveys of our residents, and that is, would they recommend South Staffordshire as a place to live? So in the 2021 survey, 92% of our residents said they would. Now, obviously, we recognise that when we ask this question, the answer is really a reflection of not just our services, but what our partners do that makes South Staffordshire such a great place to live. In terms of climate change, we've clearly demonstrated our commitment and worked with young people and community groups to tackle action locally within South Staffordshire. And ultimately, we are a safe place to live, and this is a Home Office classification that we are a low crime rate area. However, saying that, that's not to dismiss the fact that, of course, we do have crime, and we tackle this through the Community Safety Partnership locally. We work well with our partners locally and regionally to ensure the prosperity of the district continues to be enhanced, and you can see that economic growth continues at a steady pace across the district. Again, ending on a couple more stats, our house prices in the district now stand at 8 times the average salary. So an average house price being for South Staffordshire about 265k, and an average salary being about 33k. And then finally, in terms of place and superfast broadband, we've got 93% of South Staffordshire with availability compared to a national average of 95%. So whilst there's no places in South Staffordshire that are unable to receive broadband, decent connectivity is not available in some areas. So looking at our plans for the future, obviously we will always engage with our communities, and what we've done with this year's cohort of the Aspire group, they're currently looking at community engagement tools and also the creation of a toolkit for staff. And so shortly you'll be receiving an email from the group because they're really keen to gather your views on community engagement as part of that project. Andy and the digital team are continuing to work across our services to ensure that they're all accessible to all, but importantly we'll continue to enable access to services through non-digital channels as well, and I know that's already come up in tonight's meeting as an issue. We are continuing to develop our workforce, and a recent example of this, and you probably picked it up through your member weekly update, around the apprentice scheme. Both Lily and Nathan from the digital team who've won awards locally. And then finally on this slide, we are continuing to deliver on our mantra of who's best placed to deliver. So working in partnership, we've always said it, it's pivotal to our working practices, and we will continue to engage with partners on key priority areas. So in terms of going forward, as just mentioned, we will continue to work in partnership, and the business partnership is just a great vehicle to demonstrate how we work locally with our business community. Annette's already picked this up tonight, but the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, it's a key investment plan for the district, and again we've worked with our partners to develop this. And over the last few years, we've also enhanced our locality model by the introduction of locality enablers. So each of the localities has a locality enabler, and also regularly hosting parish summits 3 to 4 throughout the year, which are themed on key priority areas, and then also the virtual forums that we do online. And then finally, of course, the local plan, which will shape the future of the district for the next 15 years. I'm going to end on quite a busy slide, but it was trying to put together a life cycle of an average South Staffordshire resident for you. Now, we can change the data that we've used in this diagram, but the key data sets start from left to right, and it's picking up some of those things that our residents will experience or could experience during their lifespan. So it picks up the children and excess weight. It also talks about the healthy life expectancy for both women and men. But we can also see at that point that although our residents live longer, and that's above the national average, often between those kind of 20 years, our residents can have 2 or more serious illnesses. And some of those are listed on the end, especially around dementia. So this was just a snapshot, but we are, like I say, at the moment still working on the locality profiles, and they will come to you when we're ready. Where they are kind of, like I say, a deeper dive to this is, apart from the locality breakdown, like I say, where it interests you, they will break them down to villages as well. That's if the data is available. But I'm going to stop there, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Claudia. Do we have any questions? Councillor Ireland.
I'm seriously concerned about both child poverty and food poverty being linked, and I think that's the connection with the excess weight that some young people are carrying because their parents can't afford a healthy diet. Fuel poverty for our older people particularly is a major concern, as you know, and I'm pleased to see we've still got some warm homes money. However, I'm wondering now about targeting and how we target the groups that we know are in need at the moment. The demand on the food bank in Purton has risen in the last 12 months from about 12 a week to 36 a week, and that speaks for itself. Those of us who are supporting the food bank know the necessity of this for some families at the moment. We are facing, as you know, post-COVID, mass of mental health problems in schools. We've got children arriving with poor speech and literacy and habits which they should have learnt at home some time ago about the toilet and so forth. We've also got, with our older teenagers, we've got increasing self-harm. So I think the pressures facing us as a district are often at both ends of the spectrum, for the young people and for the older people. And I'm wondering how we are, well, if we're able to do anything with fuel poverty support for our older people, and are we able to galvanise our local businesses to be able to assist more the food poverty areas?
Thank you for that. Claudia, have you any comments?
Yeah, I probably won't answer this quite directly, but a couple of observations. So the locality profiles, like I say, they're drawn from various data sets, census data, health data, economic data. But what we also do, and we've done this for the last couple of years, is produce service data profiles. So for each of our assistant directors, we break their data down now, and we do it pan-district, but also into localities. That is really how we can start targeting those key areas in our communities. Some of the things that you've talked about, we recognise that we can't do on our own, but we can do with partners. So we're about to start work, for instance, with the County Council Public Health team on a better health programme, which will cut across the district, but again allow us to target in on those key areas. And like I say, where we can, that's where we lever in that support really to you know, help us go forward in those like I say, key areas where we can see we just can't do it on our own.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any further questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Steele.
It's not a question, it's a comment really. Could we put the our place slide back up, please? Yeah, the second item there's an ongoing commitment to mitigating climate change in the district. I don't see that with the recycling, because we're recycling a lot less now.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? No? Does anybody wish to debate anything? No? Well, there's a recommendation, and that is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is asked to note the place narrative. Are you all content with that? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 8, member working groups 2023-24.
Thank you, Chairman. So I've got 3 reports for you now, members, on the trot, and I will be obviously severely disappointed if they don't engender as much debate as the churchyards item. So, going for it. The first report is around the member working groups and the topic selection for those groups. So as members will be aware, we used to have what we called challenge panels. We've renamed them following the May 2023 adoption of the revised constitution to be called member working groups now to better reflect really what the purpose of those groups is. So the report from paragraph 3.2 onwards, members, sets out some proposed topics for those working groups. Now, we're not bound to have a set number of groups as we were previously. We always had 3 in previous years. We can have 1, 2, 3. I would suggest now more than 3 for practical purposes of making them effective. But the paragraph 3.3 and 3.4 set out 2 proposed topics. The first being around working on the new council plan. So the leader and cabinet have indicated that although they are clearly the controlling group, they do wish the council plan going forward to be cross-party supported. So working that through and the proposal through a member working group may be an appropriate avenue to take that forward. And the second topic is around picking up perhaps on some of the things that Chloe mentioned a moment ago, is how we engage with our communities. That's absolutely vital to service delivery. And so it suggested a potential topic is working on enhancing the council's position with regard to that community engagement. Should members decide that they either don't want one or both of those topics, there are some potential alternatives set out in paragraph 3.6 of the report. But again, more than happy if members have alternative proposals that they could be put forward to. But the recommendation is that you consider agree the topics for examination by the member working groups. So ideally, what I'd like to get out of this evening is your agreement to 1, 2 or 3 topics to go forward for those member working groups. Thank you, Chairman.
I thought I was supposed to say that. Well, you have it before you. What are your thoughts? Any questions at all, please? No questions? Do you have a preference, 1, 2 or 3, or do you want to consider it and then perhaps come back to Lorraine at a later date? Councillor Allen.
Just for some information, Lorraine, about the standing orders. That is quite a tough task, as I know, because it involves a lot of legalese and understanding. I don't know if that will be better done by a specific group of people who have some understanding of those, simply because it will hasten the work. And otherwise, I'm afraid some members may be dozing off.
I'll try not to take offence that standing orders is not everyone's first choice. No, absolutely. When we put forward those alternative topics under 3.6 as standing orders, every local authority has them. They are never going to be a particularly easy read, but one of the options would it be appropriate to look at that? But absolutely, maybe that we have a smaller working group on that rather than one of the larger ones.
Okay, do we have any further questions? Nothing to debate, I believe. Just for the record, the recommendation is for members to consider and agree the topics for examination by the member working groups for the current municipal year. Are you all content with that? Thank you.
Sorry, so could I just clarify that our members satisfied that we just have the two groups and it's the council plan and the community engagement? Is that members' preference?
No, it's not my preference. I would really like to see a third group with the climate change. I think this is a really pressing issue. I think, oh gosh, correct me, is the target for the council 2050? I think it needs to be sooner. It's a huge area. I would welcome that as a topic.
Thank you for that. We'll take that on board. Moving on to agenda item 9, the work programme 2023-24, and again it's Lorraine Folks.
Okay, this will probably be even quicker than the last one. So this is obviously just setting out the work programme for 23-24. It's as set out every year, members. It's done to give a framework to this to the meetings of this committee, but as members will that have been on the council for a number of years will know, it invariably changes throughout the year. Topics come on and off, but we do try and set out those parameters so members have some sort of a degree of certainty of what the work programme for this committee is. Again, if there are any suggestions for alternative matters, then more than happy to take those on board either tonight or indeed in the future. Thank you.
Okay, members, any questions? No, fine. In that case, the recommendation is that members agree the work programme for the 2023-24 municipal year. Are we all content with that? Thank you. And moving on to item 10, outcome report on the 2023 challenge panels. And again, it's Lorraine. Save the best to last.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Chairman. So this report was due to come forward early in the year to kind of wrap up the last round of challenge panels, but with the election and everything else, it's a little later than we would normally bring it back to this committee. So the last round of challenge panels for 22-23 all concluded earlier this year. The agreed actions or outcomes of those panels are set out in the appendices to the report, they have, where appropriate, been really incorporated into business as usual for the council now. So really, it is just for members to note those outcomes. Thank you, Chairman.
Any members got any questions? Councillor Still.
It's not a question. It's the minutes said the last meeting was January this year. It's now July, and this is overview and scrutiny. We've had 6 months of no overview and scrutiny, so I think we need to learn some lessons. I'm sure there's reasons why, but we should be meeting more often, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. As members will be aware, generally speaking, this committee meets every 6 to 8 weeks. Obviously, between January and July, we've had an election, so we had a period, in effect, of no meetings in the run up to that election because of heightened sensitivity pre-election period, so we didn't have any meetings in that period. There was one due to be held towards the end of March, was the last scheduled one. That was cancelled partly due to it running into the election period because the notice of election was given prior to the date of that meeting. But yes, absolutely, normally it's every 6 to 8 weeks.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? Councillor Allen.
Just looking at the recommendations, district members to push the profiles at parish level. Is it possible to have a separate pane on the website for the parish profiles? Because it would be a good thing if more members of the public took notice of what's being said and the issues we're trying to address. And I think that should be generally available to all people with ease. So another pane on the page on the website would make a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've noted that. The recommendation anyway tonight is to note the outcomes of the challenge panel. Are we all content with that, please? Thank you. Having completed the last item on our agenda, can I thank you for your attendance and contributions? And I'll formally close the meeting at 8:29.